All right, Kim, go ahead.
Hello and welcome. Mike, we are ready for you to kick us off. The Zoom is yours.
Well, thank you, Kim. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to our local infrastructure hub sessions. Let me start by thanking the U.S. Conference of Mayors, the National League of Cities, and Results for America for all the work they've been doing to make the hub a success. So far, we've been focused on helping your teams apply for funding through the bipartisan infrastructure law. Today, we'll focus on the Inflation Reduction Act, which is more about fighting climate change than inflation, but that's Washington for you. Don't ask why. The bill sets aside about $42 billion for cities and towns. And when it passed, Bloomberg Philanthropies worked with our partners at Climate Mayors and C40 to create a guidebook that helps local leaders understand how their communities can tap into the fund. Along with the infrastructure bill, there is more federal funding available to cities today than ever before. And it has the potential to do a lot of good across the country and to make a major difference in fighting climate change and improving public health. But of course, it's up to all of you to make it happen. Congress can pass bills and distribute funding, but mayors and local officials are the ones who really do the work. Getting big things done is never easy, as we all know, even with federal funding available. And that's why we've jumped in to support you. Today, we have a special guest speaker, the man who is leading the charge on turning the promise of the Inflation Reduction Act into a reality, John Podesta. I've known John for a long time, and few people understand the federal government better than he does, and how to turn ideas into action. He has always recognized the power of local action, and he's been a great partner to our foundation on a range of local climate-related issues. John, thanks for joining us. But before we hear from you, I'll hand it over to our MC, Kim Leary, who will kick off the conversation with John. Kim, as they say, the Zoom is yours.
Thank you, Mike, and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kim Leary, and I'm a senior vice president at the Urban Institute and an associate professor at Harvard Medical School. And it is my great pleasure to be your MC this afternoon. John, thank you so much for being with us today. Let me ask you a first question. Can you provide us with a high-level overview of the Inflation Reduction Act, including how it compares with the bipartisan infrastructure law or the American Rescue Plan?
Getting off mute. Yeah, Kim, thanks for having me on. And Mike, thank you for all that you're doing, both in assembling this group, but all the work you've done across the country to tackle the climate crisis and all the work you've done across the world. You're really an historic figure in pulling and really understanding the power of cities to make change happen. So let me start with those thanks. And thanks to all the mayors who are on this call. Sometimes I think I have a tough job, and I think about your job, and I know that, nothing is quite like being a mayor of a big city. But Kim, to your point, the Inflation Reduction Act is the largest investment in clean energy and tackling the climate crisis in American history and indeed in global history. It is $370 billion over 10 years to transform not just the power sector, but to decarbonize transportation, the building sector, and to invest in clean manufacturing. It's big, but it's also different. And you posed the question, sort of implied in your question, how's it different than the ARP and the bipartisan infrastructure law? I think particularly for city officials on this call, they're used to dealing with programs in which the federal government is granting money to states or local communities. The IRA is really 2/3 of the money is actually flowing through the U.S. tax code. It's built around an investment strategy that is intended to transform the economy. It has a feature in the law, I'll come back to this, that permits nonprofits and local governments and cities to take advantage of those tax credits in a way that is unusual for a feature called direct pay. But largely, this is intended to direct private sector investment into communities that have often borne the brunt of industrial and power sector pollution, and to get on with the task of meeting the president's climate goals of reducing our emissions by 50% by 2030 and having a 100% clean power sector by 2035. So I think and I'll end with this, if you have a development strategy that's built on sustainability, built on cleaning up your city, there are advantages in this law across the board, and we can get into the details about that.
John, thank you for helping us to appreciate the distinguishing feature of the Inflation Reduction Act. Let me ask you a little more about that. Many of the provisions do come in the form of consumer or business-facing tax incentives, as you mentioned. What should mayors be doing to spread awareness of these benefits so their constituents can leverage them to their full potential?
Yeah, first of all, I think let me start by saying that the advantages that cities can take, including some grant programs that are very direct. EPA tomorrow will be granting to 50 states, Puerto Rico, and a number of large SMSAs planning grants to reduce pollution in their communities. And for smaller cities, one of the features of the direction that EPA is giving to the states is they have to work with their cities and communities across their state to provide a plan going forward that opens up and accesses a $5 billion pot of implementation money. So that's very important. But as I said, for the most part, these tax credits are intended for private sector investment. There's also lending programs that have the same feature. So I think the way mayors really ought to think about that is each city's different, each community is different. What are the unique assets I have in my community? How do I work with my business community, small business community, to take advantage of the substantial bonus tax credits that are available to invest in clean power, in building retrofits, in clean manufacturing? And how can I take advantage of that direct pay feature that I mentioned, which permits cities themselves to get direct payments from the Treasury to do work in municipal buildings, in battery storage, in changing over their fleet from to electric vehicles. Those are all available directly to cities, but I think the big pots of money really are going to support private sector investment in your cities. And I would note that there are very substantial bonus payments in those credits for investing in disadvantaged communities or in so-called energy communities, places that were traditionally invested in fossil fuel infrastructure. There's a very strong kicker to make clean energy investments in those places. So for the mayors who have that legacy infrastructure in their communities, there's advantages on transforming those facilities into clean energy facilities.
So thank you very much for that set of incisive questions that mayors and city officials can ask themselves to prepare for the set of opportunities here. We've put in the chat for our viewers some links to climate action plans from cities. And for mayors who are working on developing climate action plans, John, to what extent are there opportunities to support those plans in the Inflation Reduction Act?
Well, I noted the grants that are going out tomorrow, which is, in essence, these are the leaders in the country, and I thank them for doing that. And I think this planning money is intended to give the resources to cities, in essence, to catch up, maybe leap over, and think about all the places in your city where livability can work, where there's the availability of rooftop solar, of community-based solar, of the tremendous advantages there are in building clean manufacturing capacity into those communities. And another program in the Inflation Reduction Act, which might be of interest to some of the mayors, is a so-called greenhouse gas reduction fund, which will support public sector lending facilities that are trying to deploy rooftop solar, community solar in their communities, specifically aimed at low income and moderate income neighborhoods. The other thing that I think you should be aware of is there's $9 billion that will be available through state energy offices for rebates that go directly to consumers. And I think mayors will play an extremely important role in the public education side of letting those consumers know about the availability of doing, again, retrofits. You can literally, for low-income households, install heat pumps at no cost through those rebate programs. They'll operate through the state energy offices. So those of you who are used to working with the state energy offices, that should be no great hurdle, but be aware that you're going to have to create a partnership there and create. One of the things we've been urging is to create partnerships with your local contractors, your HVAC contractors, your local electricians, et cetera, to educate them about the opportunities that their customers have through these programs, so that they can be essentially spread the word throughout those neighborhoods and in the community. The same thing is true with respect to a provision that is just launched by the Treasury Department to allocate credits for small-scale rooftop solar across largely urban environments across the country.
John, you mentioned earlier the equity dimensions of the Inflation Reduction Act, and you've already given us a few examples of how there's a strategy for investing in underserved communities, including those that have been affected by the coal industry. Can you say just a little more about how cities could leverage those particular provisions in the Inflation Reduction Act?
Yeah. So there again, the way this bill is structured, and it may be new to people on the phone, there are base credits for production tax credits and investment tax credits for the deployment of clean power in particular. And take that as a strong example. It applies to a few other things, but clean power. What the Inflation Reduction Act has done is it gives you a bonus up to 10% to invest in disadvantaged communities, up to 20% to invest in subsidized multifamily housing units. That's a huge advantage to a developer to be able to not just only take a 30% credit, but to add 10% on top or 20% on top of that. And so I think developers are very interested in partnering with mayors and with their teams to think about places where the advantage of having that additional credit from that kind of deployment, particularly as I said in the solar world, it applies to wind as well, is a very, very strong advantage. And I think we're seeing developers who really are anxious to get out there and work with mayors, work with cities to be able to kind of deploy that technology and take advantage in partnership of that credit.
Thank you so much for framing the Inflation Reduction Act for us and really zeroing in on opportunities for mayors and their cities. Let's now open up the Zoom for questions and discussions from our mayors. So our first question for John comes from Mayor Cownie. Mayor, please feel free to come off mute and ask your question.
All right, thank you, Kim, and thank you, John, for participating. We applaud the Biden administration's leadership in combating climate change. The U.S. Conference of Mayors passed a resolution acknowledging the climate crisis and our support of the 1.5 centigrade target from the Paris Climate Accord. Unfortunately, it's clear that the global warming is rapidly progressing beyond what scientific models have projected for years. Can you communicate on the climate solution or situation, should I say, we are in now, and how mayors can best communicate this crisis to our businesses and residents and show them ways to access programs and dollars to help us mitigate this?
Well, thank you, Mayor. And I think that you put your finger on it. Look, the climate crisis is getting worse. People are feeling it virtually in every place around the country, from fire in the West to the drought in the Southwest, to extreme storms, to just before we started this call, we were talking about the weird weather in New York. The sea level rise that's going to affect communities and coastal communities across the eastern seaboard and the Gulf, the effect on fisheries. It is having dramatic effects on economies and communities across the country. I think obviously people have just gone through a long struggle with coming to grips with an economy that was disrupted by COVID. They're thinking front and center about, how do we succeed? How do we get our kids back in school? These things that are right in front of us. But I think what marries the Inflation Reduction Act to this long-term challenge that we're facing right now and right today, is the opportunity that presents to do things differently, to invest in a more sustainable future, to deal with the problems of resiliency in our own communities, to reduce levels of pollution, to get the people to work, doing amazing work to build out, whether that's in retrofitting buildings or building out new sources of power, putting charging infrastructure in communities across the country, investing in electric vehicles. The opportunity, the upside of putting people to work doing that work, creating a cycle of innovation, creating a strong economy, marries with the threat and gives people hope that this is not just a story of doom and gloom, but one of investment and opportunity. That's what I think the president tried to present during the course of his campaign. That's what he's delivered in the first 2 years. That's what we're all about in terms of trying to implement that law, which is to create a very strong economy from the bottom up and the middle out, so that people see themselves in that clean energy future.
Thank you for your question, Mayor Cownie. Let me now turn to Mayor Woods.
Sorry, just trying to make sure that I could get off mute over here. So one of my questions would be sort of in our regional work organizing for federal funding, and I'm the mayor down here of Tempe, Arizona, we're really working to embrace sort of both the voices of our community-based organizations as well as the private sector. So I guess my question would be, what are some of your recommendations on how we could ensure that the private sector stays connected and true to the Justice 40 initiative, and also sort of investing in our neighborhoods and our residents that truly do need this investment the most?
Yeah. Look, I think Mayor, you're going to play an enormous role in doing that, in that convening power. We try to do it at the national level by bringing large employers, labor unions, Justice 40 communities together in the same room to think through where investments can take place. How do you listen harder? How do you create pre-apprenticeship programs that lead to good jobs, that lead to apprenticeships? But really, where the action is on the ground. It's with I think the tremendous convening power that you have in your city halls to bring those voices together and to ensure. One of the things that keeps me up at night is permitting. And I think, people always say, we've got to speed things up, And I firmly believe that we can't go at the pace we've been going at and accomplish the goals that are made available through this act. But that means we have to bring people in earlier in the process, listen to their concerns, try to find reasonable paths forward to make sure that rather than at the end of the day, we're in litigation over people being ignored at the front end of the process. We got to get them to the table early so that these projects can get built. We have huge needs to build transmission in this country, to build out those renewable resources. In your neck of the woods, we're also seeing these major investments now through the other vehicles that the president's passed, through the CHIPS and Science Act, through the bipartisan infrastructure law. These things have, I think, to work together to create pathways for good employment, decent employment, and ensure that those benefits are coming to the neighborhoods that they're intended to benefit. One of the things that I'll just note in the Inflation Reduction Act, which is really different, really unusual, is again, through this vehicle of giving bonus credit, you get a 5x credit for paying prevailing wage and using certified apprenticeships, which opens up the capacity on the workforce side for pre-apprenticeship programs, to work with community-based groups, with unions, to get community benefits agreements in place. And, again, we're trying to push that at the national level, but where the rubber really hits the road is in the communities you represent. So we want to be good partners. I should note, in addition to the guide that you put out, we did a hopefully plain English guide that's available at cleanenergy.gov. And our doors are open, and we'll send, we're kind of all in on this. So if you need federal people to show up in terms of community forums in order to explain the benefits and also to try to push the employers in your community to do the right thing, we're happy to try to work through that and do that.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
And thank you, Mayor Woods, for your question. Our last question this afternoon comes from Mayor Scott. Please come off mute and join us.
Thank you, and thank you very, very much. My question is real simple. Can you comment on how you think the administration is working to coordinate the benefits, both of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act with the climate vision of the IRA? Clearly, they are related, and I think that many of us in cities will be looking to maximize them both in tandem.
Yeah. So Mitch Landrieu, I mean, it's kind of like I've worked at 3 White Houses, so this is, I'm a kind of repeat offender. This is an unusual arrangement for past White Houses, Republican or Democrat. And I think the president saw the need to ensure that there were people really on this implementation task force. And our new chief of staff, Jeff Science, is really all over this as well. I work very closely with Mitch Landrieu, who's in charge of the bipartisan infrastructure law, and Gene Sperling, who's what you've probably many of you have met, who's was brought in early to do the recovery plan. We're trying to coordinate as much as possible. In Mitch and my case, we have a lot of kind of overlapping programs because the charging money is in the bipartisan infrastructure law, and the EV money is in the IRA. But as he likes to say, and I like to repeat, it's one team, one fight. We're trying to make sure that whatever door you're coming through, we're trying to be helpful, connect you. We have very, very strong partnership here. There's money in both bills, for example, on the Western drought. So we have a very strong collaboration, coordination on that. So I think at least when you get here, and we will try to coordinate the federal agencies to make sure that what we're not telling you what your development strategy is. You're telling us what your development strategy is, and we're trying to give you advice about which of these provisions in the bills might be useful in carrying out and executing what you see as the vision for your city. So we want to be good partners at the community level, and I think, like I said, whatever door you knock on, we'll find the right partners here to get that job done.
Mayor Scott, thank you for your question. And thank you so very much for joining us today, John. You've taken us inside of the Inflation Reduction Act and really, I think, helped us to recognize the opportunities that are right there and available for cities. Your valuable insights on this transformative legislation, I think, will be of help to mayors, to city officials, and of course, to residents of their communities. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Right. And I mean it, call me anytime.
We may take you up on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
So it's now my pleasure to introduce John Porcari, who will moderate our policy panel today. John, second John, but also John is the port envoy to the Biden-Harris administration Supply Chain Disruptions Task Force. I'll say that again, the Supply Chains Disruptions Task Force. And he previously served as the United States Deputy Secretary of Transportation. Thank you, John, for being here today. And the Zoom is yours.
Thank you, Kim, and thank you all for joining us today. And I want to especially thank John Podesta for setting the stage for this discussion today. This is really an unprecedented opportunity, and we have four great mayors that are going to take the discussion to the next level. One of the things I think we all heard loud and clear a few minutes ago from John is that we need to get organized across these different bills. But we need to organize ourselves horizontally and vertically. And there's nobody better than mayors for doing that. And what I mean by that is horizontally, if you think about it, it works across the entire spectrum of city agencies. Housing, the idea of reconnecting communities, planning, tree planting, energy efficiency. And it works horizontally across the business community as well, who are an integral element of implementing this Inflation Reduction Act, in particular, some of the revitalization, affordable housing, and other provisions of it. So if we think horizontally, it's an all hands on deck approach. And then vertically as well, it's true. Cities can't implement this fully and effectively without vertically integrating with the states that they're housed in. So the state economic development plans, for example, the tax incentives that would be promoted and marketed jointly with the state. Things like fleet purchases, EV chargers. There's opportunities to piggyback on state procurements to do that. The $9 billion that John mentioned on state energy office rebates, the retrofit money, is access to the state. So we have to organize ourselves vertically and horizontally to actually make this happen. And we have four great mayors here today. Mayor Pam Hemminger of Chapel Hill, North Carolina, who served as mayor of has served as mayor of Chapel Hill since 2015 and is chair of the North Carolina Metropolitan Mayors Coalition. Mayor Frank Cownie of Des Moines, Iowa. Mayor Cownie was first elected in 2004, and he's president of the ICLEI Global and a trustee of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. Mayor Brandon Scott of Baltimore. Mayor Scott was first elected in 2020 and was previously president of the Baltimore City Council. And then finally, Mayor Corey Woods of Tempe, Arizona. And Mayor Woods has served as a mayor since 2020 and is also the executive director of community relations at Arizona State University Prep Academy. So with that, I'd actually like to start with Mayor Hemminger, if I can. And for each of the mayors, can you bring us up to speed on the climate action plans in your cities, how you're actually implementing those? Where are you in that process of implementation? And specifically, how does the Inflation Reduction Act fit into the implementation of those climate action plans? Mayor Hemminger?
Thank you. And we're glad to be part of this. And I will just say Chapel Hill prides itself on environmentalism. We've had a climate plan adopted in April of 2021, and we recognized again this year as one of the top 122 cities in the world for our robust and transparent plan. We've worked really, really hard. I will say it's different from mid-sized cities. We don't have the bigger budgets. We don't have the staff. It's hard to be competitive to get those grants. We're very excited about the tax incentive program that we can now participate in, because those upfront costs are really difficult for smaller cities to be able to put in solar and wind and energy saving things. But we've made a great stab at it. We did a inventory of what was causing our climate carbon situation, and 96% of the emissions come from transportation and buildings. So we've worked really hard. We have a fare free transit system. We're upgrading our fleet to electric. We have many electric buses, but again, because we're mid-size, we have to join on other city contracts, which is great in North Carolina because we share, to join in other contracts to get a better price per unit of those buses, garbage trucks, fleet type things. We've been working on all our public facilities to make them more energy efficient, to replace all the lights in our parking lots, our public facilities, our ball fields, all those places to reduce that carbon footprint. And we have all these other programs going on that citizens and businesses can participate in. We have a 92-point plan that's listed on our website. And we've done a lot of partnerships with UNC, with the Cities Initiative, again, with Metro Mayors, and trying to work together to find those opportunities to learn from each other, to R&D, rip off and duplicate, and figure out how to make it for yourselves there. But heat mapping was huge for us. We've been tree planting, especially in those disadvantaged neighborhoods where the heat index, we used UNC students to map it for us. We've also been reducing our waste, especially in those neighborhoods too, with composting and things that are available to our businesses to help reduce miles traveled with garbage and to re-admit. We have solarized the Triangle, which is huge for our area. And it's one of 11 communities who are participating in this to get a better discounted price on solar. And we've had over 1,500 signups in the first phase, which is record-breaking. It's just been an amazing adventure. The community is all in. Partnerships are though what make it, working together, trying to find a way forward to reduce those miles traveled and get people out of their cars. And our EV, we have the highest concentration of electric vehicles in the state right here in Chapel Hill. So we've been putting in EV infrastructure as fast as we can go. And NEVI is coming to North Carolina, is one of the top states to do. And we're very, very excited about those opportunities as well.
Great, thank you, Mayor. That's a lot, and clearly you're moving on a lot of fronts at once. Mayor Cownie, same question. How are you doing on your climate action plan, and what have you found along the way?
Well, you can only imagine we found a lot along the way. And we're always learning, and we have to adjust. We've been working on climate action and climate plans since the early 2000s. And working with the U.S. Conference of Mayors and working with, as you mentioned, ICLEI, the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives, as it was formerly known. But we are now working on our latest climate plan that we are calling ADAPT DSM. And I'm proud that Des Moines has been a leader, in announcing bold climate mitigation goals. We're working towards a 24/7 carbon-free production of electricity across our whole grid, and we have to, like many other places, we do not have our own production facility. We have to work with Mid-American Energy, and we have gotten them to agree that by 2035 we're going to achieve that carbon-free free production of 100% 24/7 365 carbon-free electricity across our entire grid. And we're going to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. Our goal is by 2030 over 45%. This plan, as I say, it's known as ADAPT DSM. The plan consists of simple steps that we think all cities should be taking to become carbon-free, including looking and expanding our electric vehicle fleet, solar arrays, which we are using funds out of IRA and other federal funds to help accelerate and expand those plans. We've got 3 new buildings that are coming up that are going to be very much powered with solar. By the way, that agreement mostly with Mid-American Energy is wind. They've invested billions of dollars in wind energy after some of us spent some time up at the state blocking the construction of new coal plants. As I say, we're looking at all those things and developing tools to keep our residents safe during some of those extreme weather events. And as I talk about extreme weather events, here we are in the middle of the country, and a lot of people say, well, you don't have any of the issues that they have at on coastal cities, whether it be Miami or New Orleans or other places. Well, I've got to tell you that over the past, I'll just use 2020 as an example. 2020, we had a rainstorm that dumped 10 inches of rain on our city, essentially in about 4 hours. I mean, who would have thought that would happen in Des Moines, Iowa? And then I've got to tell you, 4 years ago, I had never heard a word called a derecho, which is sort of an inland hurricane. We've seen 4 of those since 2020 with speeds, wind speeds, flatline wind speeds. We're not talking about tornadoes. We're talking about hurricane force winds, flatline wide of over 120 miles an hour wind speeds right here in Des Moines, Iowa. So it's happening all over the place. We've just entered into what we call phase 3 of that ADAPT DSM plan. We've identified risks and opportunities to mitigate and see what we can do to do it. We've identified goals and solutions, which we believe everybody should do. You need to understand what your strategies are. You need to understand your solutions. You have to do benchmarking to understand where you are today and see if your strategies are working. So I would tell everybody, and we'd share any information anybody wants to look at how we're doing it, but we are benchmarking. We are putting and going to implement strategies across our city with our residents, with our businesses, with city leading by example on how we do it and what we're doing. So we're now using that information that we did on the benchmarking to develop that robust long-term plan. Then by this summer, we will begin the broad-based implementation. Obviously, we're doing a lot of this stuff as we see. We're excited to see how this work reduces our carbon footprint, and we are confident we will reach our 2035 goal. And quite frankly, we are going to be by 2050, we have committed to be carbon free.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Scott, all the cities have some common issues. Some are different for each other as well. Baltimore, I know that you're working on this on multiple fronts, and we're looking forward to hearing about your climate action plan and some of the specific steps as well.
Yeah, of course, we are a very, very unique city. We sit on the water. We also are a deeply impacted city when you think about redlining and heat islands. And we actually set goals just a year ago. I set goals for us to receive a 30% reduction by 2025 in carbon emissions, 60% by 2030, and 100 by 2045. And we've had a lot of work done on many fronts. So we have a $52 million Baltimore Energy Initiative that has helped us preserve home ownership, promote positive economic development, and reduce health costs in providing long-term savings for our families in the city. We updated our green building codes to expand the elective requirements for each project to achieve at least 10 points from a set list of categories: water and energy efficiency, indoor environmental equality, and site sustainability, or follow one of 2 zero energy paths. We've also, and this one's something I'm very proud of, made historic investments into our HUD program, which is housing upgrades to benefit seniors, that allows for us to help those older adults have their homes be weatherized and made more sustainable with energy windows, all of those things that we know we need, especially in neighborhoods like East and West Baltimore that are heat islands that have all these other issues. We also, on the transportation front, adopted our Baltimore Complete Streets Manual, which will help us create high quality pedestrian and transient oriented neighborhoods so that we're not all depending on cars. We have to build that infrastructure for things like we partner with the Federal Department of Transportation to secure $50 million to support transportation enhancement for our east-west corridor, including up to 50 new electric vehicle charging stations and the expansion of our bike lane network. And last but not least, I'll say that we also, Baltimore has three MW of on-site renewable energy generation and a 10 MW power purchase agreement for solar. We also purchased renewable energy credits for compliance with the Maryland Renewable Portfolio Standard, and as part of our electricity supply contracts, which last year was up to 20%. We have continued to do that, and even how we're building new buildings. We have built and renovated many new school buildings across the city of Baltimore in recent years, to most of many major cities. But when you think about ones in particular, like Hollowbed Academy and Graceland Park, O'Donnell Heights Elementary schools, these are our first 2 net zero energy schools. Each year, they generate as much energy on site as they use. We're trying to put all of that together, including going further in our efforts to help our neighborhoods when we're talking about food and sustainability, growing our urban farming, making sure that our infrastructure is more prepared to deal with the tides and the water that we have to deal with here in Baltimore. Across the board, we're focusing on how we can be a more sustainable city. And last but not least, mayors know that these kind of things are important. Last year, we actually provided recycling carts to every resident in the city of Baltimore to make sure that everyone has the ability to recycle.
Very good. Thank you, Mayor. And last but certainly not least, Mayor Woods, every jurisdiction has some unique challenges as well. There are some provisions in the Inflation Reduction Act that may be of special benefit to Tempe as well. We'd love to hear about your plans and some of the things that you're implementing now.
Absolutely. So the city of Tempe has a real track record of listening to our community and making significant investments in climate action. So we have 3 Ps here: planning, public engagement, and pilot projects. And all of those mean that we're ready to use those federal dollars to do 2 different things. One is to accelerate decarbonization, and 2 is to support residents and businesses to becoming more resilient to drought and extreme heat. So we have a 2022 climate action plan, and it has 4 co-created agendas. So one is our neighborhood agenda, where we partnered with Arizona State University, the largest public university in the country, to focus on extreme heat and resilience hubs. We also have a business agenda where we partner with the Tempe Chamber of Commerce, as well as a group, Local First Arizona, and we work very heavily on energy efficiency and water conservation. We have an agenda, of course, with the youth, because a lot of our young people are very interested in sustainability and climate change. So we partner with middle and high school students on school greening and local food policy. And last but certainly not least, we have a climate justice agenda, where we partner with a local community-based organization that really focuses very heavily on energy equity and indigenous land stewardship. So these agendas I can just talk about, they've really led to a much deeper level of city investment. So we've increased our sustainability and resilience staff from only 1 full-time person to 6 full-time employees. We've increased our capital budgets to include charging stations, microgrids for resilience hubs, urban forestry, transit shelters, and of course, green water infrastructure, which conserves water, adds a lot of natural shade, and of course, reduces flooding. We've got a lot of stuff too when it comes to green stormwater infrastructure planning. And we really do kind of lead the Maricopa County area in thinking about long-term funding solutions for really much needed climate action infrastructure. So our city council actually approved a green stormwater master plan that includes a feasibility study for a combined stormwater and urban cooling facility. This would create a permanent funding stream for green stormwater infrastructure, trees, and also eventually a larger infrastructure like cooling centers and resilience hubs. And I just have to once again talk about a permanent funding stream. One of the things that we really want here in the city of Tempe is we don't want this to be based on who's mayor or who's the city council at the time. We really want this to be in existence permanently. So whoever the elected officials are here, we can guarantee these things will still take place. And I have to give a shout out as well to the mayor of Ann Arbor, where I went to undergrad at the University of Michigan, Mayor Christopher Taylor, who's obviously made this happen just this past fall. Last but certainly not least, we've worked very much with our congressional delegation, Senators Mark Kelly, Kirsten Sinema, as well as Congressman Greg Stanton, who've brought a lot of money to the city of Tempe to help us pursue these goals. They brought in drought resilient solutions funding to upgrade our water reclamation facility. Congressman Stanton, I know, is responsible for a $37.5 million authorization to get a facility that was in mothballs for the last 10 years, which will be very critical to the city of Tempe. We're talking about also trying to find ways to extend our Tempe streetcar, which opened up last May, which is already exceeding ridership numbers in a huge way. And the Tempe Transportation Department, we actually applied for something called Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity. And this is to bridge, kind of to create a bridge, whatever, to improve biking and walking around Tempe Town Lake, a Tempe Town Lake, which is actually the second most visited tourist site in the entire state, only second to the Grand Canyon. So there's a lot of great things going on here at the city of Tempe right now when it comes to climate action. But the big thing I can obviously say is we're very big on partnering with our community partners, our community-based organizations, as well as Arizona State University, to make sure that we can really meet and exceed all of these climate action goals.
Thanks, Mayor. All 4 of those are great portraits of action across the board on climate change through those climate action plans. Let's open up the floor, if we can, to mayors for questions. We have a few minutes for that of our mayors here. And while we're waiting for any questions to come in, one I'd like to start with the 4 of you is there's actually 3 pieces of legislation here, if you think about it: the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the CHIPS Act, and the Inflation Reduction Act. And one wag called them Uncle Bill, Uncle Chips, and Uncle Ira. If you take the 3 together, they actually are pretty synergistic. All 3 require substantial interaction and consensus building with the community, with labor, and with the business communities. And I'm just curious, mayors, if you have examples and how you've worked that in practical terms, because mayors are above all practical in working through these issues. Anyone want to jump in on that?
You want us to put a hand up, or should we just start talking?
Go ahead, Mayor. You've got it.
Well, quickly speaking again to our 24/7 carbon-free goals, City of Des Moines hopes to access all those funds that you just mentioned to continue electrifying our fleet and installing solar arrays in our city buildings and get them off the grid and hopefully produce clean energy for our own residents. However, much of the funding has been focused on our residents, as it should be. So we will be working to educate our residents, businesses, and all of our nonprofits on the energy efficiency tax credits and rebates. We would like to see more funding made directly available, quite frankly, to those of us at the local level. I am not going to speak of any states, but I happen to live in one that there are some of those that are kind of climate deniers that are leaders here and have not been as helpful as they are as the administration has been. So with this in mind, I'd like to also, I guess, ask my colleagues how they think we can best educate our residents about this climate change crisis and how we get information out about those tax credits and rebates and grants so that our citizens and local businesses can take advantage of all this federal funding that's coming out that hopefully will help us make a great planet and a great state, and for Iowa, a great city and a great country, and quite frankly, save the world.
So I can jump in on that a little bit here. I mean, so my first thought, of course, is, thinking about regional collaboration. I mean, the reality is, in order to kind of bring down the federal funding and use the dollars really effectively, we really work with kind of a lot of local partners. I mean, as an example, we work with the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation and the National Endowment of the Arts to bring down both local and national philanthropic dollars. And we have consultants such as Cityscale and the Refocus Group that really help us in a lot of that regional collaboration work. So we partner with the cities of Phoenix, Mesa, Scottsdale, Maricopa County as well, and a lot of other communities. So we can make sure that we are actually partnering and not competing with one another. Because as we all know, climate action solutions don't know jurisdictions. If the air is better in the city of Tempe and we are implementing sustainability features that really do work, everyone around us benefits. A rising tide truly does lift all boats. And I should also say too, that we work really, really hard to capacity build with a lot of the community-based organizations. Kind of talking about my first answer, we really try very hard to put the community in the driver's seat and really center their voices in a lot of these conversations. So it's not me or our council at City Hall just dictating to other people what should happen. We really ask the people in our community and those who are truly affected what they would need. And with that in mind, we actually gave local philanthropic money to community-based organizations for a local climate mini grant program. And actually with that mini grant program, they developed 6 guiding principles for how local government can work with community-based organizations to really build authentic trust-building partnerships and also build up our Justice 40 muscle. We also, I should say, lastly, have worked really hard as well with the business community. I know I talked earlier about our partnership with the Tempe Chamber of Commerce and with Local First Arizona. Those partnerships are really critical to make sure that we're developing our workforce and identifying critical labor solutions, but also incorporating all the elements I talked about into the grants. We want to make sure that that money, both locally and nationally, is really put to good use and that we really are truly advancing the ball in Tempe.
And I'm going to jump in and say that we're similar to Des Moines, that our state legislature isn't quite as aligned on climate action, but our cities are. And so we're working with those partnerships, especially in transportation. As you said, it doesn't know any boundaries. So we want to improve it for everybody. So we partner to try to pull down grants together for a region to bring those monies here to help us move forward. Our governor is aligned with us, but in order to get those actual partnerships working, we have to find new strategies and then show up in force with voices and community to our state to say we need help. We also don't control our utilities here either. And we have a utility company that is focused on natural gas for the next 15 years. And it's very frustrating from this point of view. And our citizens need that education to help advocate because they are the customers of this utility company. And it's really important to get them out there saying, we want renewable energy, we want investments. We've also worked with our community college system to create courses and career paths for people to move into renewable energy pathways, great jobs, great opportunities. And again, our university system is amazing, and they have a dedicated Institute of the Environment looking at all these different kinds of things to help offer. And I know that if we partner together as cities across the country, we can make these things happen. We can make it a reality. We are a strong voice when we talk together, and the federal government has been listening, and it's been an incredible change over the last few years than it was when we dropped out of the Paris Accord. So this is amazing. We're excited about opportunities that can come our way with these tax credits. Again, the mid-sized cities, though, they need help to stay competitive to pull down some of those dollars.
Thanks, Mayor. And I think we have time for one more question. Can I call on Kathy Fales? Kathy, are you with us?
Yes, I'm right here. So I'm on the planning commission for a town of 499 people in Vermont. And we've been, following the state money that's coming down for energy resiliency. But it's very hard to find examples of really small scale, projects like our town hall, our meeting house, our town garage. So I just wondered if anybody, had some resources for the really tiny towns that just don't have staff.
It's a great question, and I think that we may have to circle back to you on that. But I know that as just one example of resources, the U.S. Conference of Mayors does collect and put out different examples, large and small. So that may be one way that we can actually do that. But everybody needs to be included here, and this rising tide needs to lift all boats. So we'll make sure that we have examples on the lower end of the scale, the small end of the scale as well, because it's just every bit as important. You're welcome, Kathy. The questions that we couldn't get to today, we will circle back with you and do that. I want to thank you all for this, because at this point, I need to turn it back over to Kim Leary for a poll.
So thank you, John, for moderating a fabulous panel. And I'd also like to offer a special thanks to Mayor Cownie, to Mayor Hemminger, to Mayor Scott, and to Mayor Woods for joining us and for sharing your advice and your insights. I'd also like to thank those of you who have entered questions and comments into the chat. That's a really important part of our dialogue across mayors and across communities. So thank you for that. And as John said, we will circle back with replies and responses. So as John mentioned, at this point, I would like to invite all of you to respond to a very quick Zoom poll. We really do value your feedback, and we make use of it to make our programs stronger for all of you. So please just take 1 minute. It will take no longer than that, I promise, to complete the survey that's on your screen right now. And while you are doing that, let me just once again thank all of you, and especially our panelists, for joining us today. It's particularly wonderful to now have a look across multiple critical investments that are available to cities, and to be able to see, as John described, some of the synergies that exist across these various pieces of legislation. So we hope you will join us again for our next local infrastructure tech and innovation session, which will occur on March 15th. And there we'll examine lessons learned from early adopters of electric buses, including Charlotte, North Carolina, and Honolulu, Hawaii. We'll be looking at procurement, workforce, and other operational challenges, as well as funding opportunities for electric buses under the bipartisan infrastructure law. And as always, you can find more information on our website, which is localinfrastructure.org. We also thank all of our partners who are listed on the screen right now. And we thank you for your participation and look so forward to having you join us again soon. Thank you.